He came out fighting 13 months after Carlos Ghosn's shock arrest at Tokyo airport, 9 days after his daring escape from house arrest in Japan. The once all-powerful boss of the Renault-Nissan alliance staging a press conference in Beirut.
I felt I was a hostage of a country that I have served for 17 years.
Ghosn making good on his promise to name names, accusing Nissan executives of throwing him under the bus in the name of stopping an eventual merger with Renault. We'll put that to our panel and ask what next for the 65-year-old Brazilian-born Frenchman of Lebanese origin, Ghosn, who insists he's not a fugitive and that he's going to clear his name. Can he? We'll look at the case and the accusations leveled against a Japanese legal system where prosecution results in a 99% conviction rate. Who better knew the rules? For the nearly 2 decades he was in charge of the alliance, Ghosn was adulated for bringing Nissan back from the brink. So, was he a framed fall guy, or did he show entitlement and an above-the-law, privileged attitude in his escape? Today in the France 24 debate, Carlos Ghosn speaks, talking about it with us, Daily Beast contributor Jake Edelstein, who sat down with Carlos Ghosn back in August. Thank you for joining us from Tokyo.
Oh, you're welcome. Good morning. It's 3 a.m. here.
All right. 7:10 p.m. in Paris. Criminal and human rights attorney William Julier is with us as well. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening.
Jean-Yves Collin, North Asia analyst at the Asia Center think tank. And from Beirut, Alia Ibrahim, co-founder of Daraj Media. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Yet when on December 30th, Carlos Ghosn suddenly popped up in the Lebanese capital. It was just the latest twist in a case chock full of surprises. Let's get this reminder from Shirley Sitbon.
Carlos Ghosn's escape took months of planning, and the businessman decided to go ahead with it late December when he learned one of his trials would be delayed. Sunday, December 29th, surveillance cameras outside Ghosn's apartment in Tokyo show him walking out alone. He took a 3-hour train ride to Osaka's international airport. There, he embarked on a private jet from Turkish private jet operator MNG. But Ghosn wasn't on the passengers list. It's believed he traveled in this trunk, which was conveniently too big for the airport scanners. These holes were made so Carlos Ghosn could breathe. The plane did not fly directly to Beirut, which could have raised suspicions, but to Istanbul. Once it landed in Turkey, the trunk was transferred into a second MNG plane. On December 30th at 7:29 a.m., the businessman was back in his home country. He checked in through customs services like a regular passenger with his French passport. 2 men present on those jets are suspected of playing key roles in the escape. Michael Taylor, a former U.S. Green Beret with close ties to Lebanon. And the other alleged accomplice, a former member of the Lebanese Special Forces.
He obviously didn't escape on his own. He paid someone to smuggle him out. He paid from 1 million to 1.5 million euros.
Since his escape, Ghosn has kept a low profile until Wednesday, when he'll address the case publicly for the first time and show how he plans to defend himself.
And before we go to our panel, let's cross to France 24's James Andre, who attended that press conference in Beirut. James, pardon the automotive pun, but Carlos Ghosn was certainly firing on all cylinders.
It was definitely firing on all cylinders. You're absolutely right. Now, it was quite an impressive affair. You had journalists from around the world, all the main media outlets, a lot of very well-known faces in the crowd asking questions to Carlos Ghosn. And Carlos Ghosn, who started with an opening statement of over an hour and 5 minutes, during which he indeed showed some documents. He also named names. Now, he named names of top executives in Nissan who, according to him, plotted against him with the help of senior members of the Japanese government, though he did not name those, the senior members of the Japanese government. Carlos Ghosn did not want to go into how he managed to leave the country, though he did explain why. But in any case, Carlos Ghosn did really, at length, explain that coup, as he says, that was basically organized against him to get rid of him. This is what he had to say.
Some of our Japanese friends thought the only way to get rid of the influence of Renault on Nissan is to get rid of me, which unfortunately they were right, because when you see exactly what's happening today, where Renault has very little influence on what's going on in Nissan, even though they put a nice face on what's taking place, you know exactly that the Japanese have the right analysis by saying, we get rid of him, we will get much more autonomy for Nissan.
And when we think back to when Carlos Ghosn was rearrested when he tried to stage a press conference in Tokyo, James, this time he was really playing on home turf.
Absolutely, playing on home turf. He was very, very good, actually, in this exercise. He was speaking very fast. He spoke in all the languages he actually masters. It was quite impressive to see the Q&A with journalists from Brazil asking him questions in Brazilian Portuguese and him answering in French, in English, in Arabic. And indeed, Carlos Ghosn very much defending his name, saying that he absolutely wanted to re-establish his name and his reputation. Carlos Ghosn, who seemed unscathed after what was clearly an ordeal for him, he did at length explain what he had been through the fact of being in solitary confinements for weeks and months on end, for being in a prison where there was only one person who could actually speak English, and then that person was only there one day a week. Him telling that he was be left for days on end during holidays, for example, the New Year holidays, where for 6 days he didn't see anyone. And indeed, explaining also that the prosecutors were trying to force him to confess, telling him, look, it can all stop if you tell us what we want to hear, but it will be worse if you carry on withdrawing information. Carlos Ghosn saying that he felt as if he had died in that prison and that he had been reborn when he saw his wife, Carol Ghosn, who was actually present during that press conference, sitting on the front row, just looking at her husband as he was giving the speech. Carlos Ghosn, who actually also said that he was wanting to have what was owed to him, both by Nissan and Renault, letting us imagine that there would be a possibility of legal action in order to get his retirement packages from both these companies, but stopping short of actually confirming any legal action. So indeed, Carlos Ghosn determined to make a comeback after what had happened to him. And Carlos Ghosn, who looked indeed in fine form, it has to be said, during this press conference. The question is, of course, has he convinced everyone? That remains to be seen. Another detail, and it's an important one, tomorrow he will be heard by the Lebanese justice system. This is what we've been hearing from media here. A variety of newspapers and an important television here have confirmed that technically he should be heard by the prosecutor tomorrow morning.
All right, many thanks, James Andre. Let's see if Carlos Ghosn's convinced our panel. Let me begin with you, William Julier. You just heard what James said, that he's got meetings in the morning. Several of the reporters asked him, but now you're a quote-unquote prisoner in Lebanon because there is no extradition agreement between Lebanon and Japan. There's that red notice that Japan put out for his arrest. So is he in effect confined to Beirut at this point?
He is. There's no extradition treaty between Japan and Lebanon, but this is not the reason why he could not be extradited to Japan. Japan has only got 2 extradition treaties with the USA and with South Korea. But many countries do extradite to Japan and the other way round, because Japan has got legislation that enables extradition even if there's no treaty. So the problem is not that one. Carlos Ghosn is protected against extradition because he's a Lebanese citizen and Lebanon does not extradite their own citizens. But on the side of that, he is now under the threat of an international warrant of arrest, meaning a red notice from Interpol, red notice. And for that reason, Lebanon, being part of Interpol, needs to at least call him in for an interview in order to tell him that he has this red notice issued against him.
So if you're an attorney...
They can't escape that.
If you're an attorney and you're defending a client like Carlos Ghosn, do you tell them, let me do the talking, don't stage a big press conference? Or did he do the right thing by having this
I think that he's been prepared by lawyers, of course, also, not only, but by lawyers. And I think that it was not possible in his case not to stage this conference. His escape made so much noise the day it happened that he had to come forward, and he had to do it in order to prepare what is coming. He did not give many details about, legally speaking, what is coming. I will say a word, if you want me to, about what I think could be coming and what his legal team must be preparing, including on Interpol level.
All right, let's talk about that in a moment. But first, Jake Edelstein, how did he do?
Oh, I thought he did really well. You know, Mr. Ghosn has been taking boxing lessons here in Tokyo because he's had a lot of free time on his hands. And I thought he came out with some nice jabs and some nice punches, nothing that would knock anybody out. But I think he had his hands sort of tied behind his back because the Japanese government has been clearly leaning on the Lebanese government to keep him quiet, just as they have exerted pressure on him not to say the things that he wanted to say, including yesterday's unexpected announcement they had an arrest warrant for his wife out. So all things being equal, I think he did marvelously well at the press conference.
Yeah, on the eve of Ghosn's press conference, Japanese prosecutors issuing that warrant for Carol Ghosn's arrest, accusing her of lying to judges in questioning over payments made by a Nissan subsidiary to an Omani car dealer. Also on Tuesday, Jake, Tokyo issuing a red notice request that we talked about to Interpol to bring back Carlos Ghosn. All the while, the Japanese ambassador to Lebanon was granted an audience by the country's president, Michel Aoun. How badly does Japan want him back, though?
You know, there's a question of whether they really want him back at all, because right before the Olympics, it would have been terrible look for Japan to have Carlos Ghosn being tried, because it reminds everybody that once you fall into the meat grinder that is the Japanese justice system, they can basically hold you prisoner all the way up to your trial, even if you're not guilty. And I think that may be one of the reasons they decided to move the trial to 2021. So can you imagine Carlos Ghosn not being able to see his wife and then being told that it'll be another year before his trial even begins? And I think that his lawyers told him it'll be 5 years before he gets cleared of one charge, and they weren't going to try all the charges at once. So it seems like a very, very long time. He also met with Mark Karpelis, the Frenchman who was lucky enough to win a not guilty verdict, which is a 1% chance. And I don't think Karpelis cheered him up very much either.
Jake, you wrote the following in the Daily Beast. Curiously, about 10 days prior to Ghosn's departure on December the 20th, Japanese State Minister for Foreign Affairs Keizuki Suzuki visited Lebanon for the first time in 3 years. It seems like an unusual coincidence. Are you suggesting that Japan looked the other way, that this tale of a daring escape isn't as daring as we think?
It is certainly a possibility. And everyone knows that the Abe administration lies. I mean, lies at a level that so many people disbelieve the government here. I think that 81% of the Japanese people say they no longer believe government statistics. So, yeah, that's a real possibility. The whole thing has been an embarrassment for Japan. Nissan stocks have plummeted. The Japanese justice system has been put under scrutiny. I think that 80% of your countrymen in France think that Carlos Ghosn escaping was the right thing to do. I think that was a Le Monde survey. So, you know, this hasn't played out well for the Japanese government and the Abe administration. So having Carlos leave and having this problem sort of swept under the rug, that's not a bad way for things to be.
Jean-Yves
Or maybe they just wanted to meet with the Lebanese.
Let me bring in Jean-Yves Collin. Do you agree on this?
I do think that in Japan, viewed by the Japanese, Japan was strongly humiliated and made a fool. And so I think the Japanese government will make everything it can to bring back Carlos Ghosn. But what can he do? He will try to exert direct pressure on Lebanon. Maybe this visit is a first step of this pressure. He will try to use friends of Lebanon, and who are the friends of Lebanon? You have two main contributors in terms of oil export to Japan, which are Saudi Arabia and Iran. Japan has a good relationship with Saudi Arabia and has a kind of courteous relationship with Iran. The prime minister or president of Iran was in Japan about 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago. And the last one is France. I think Japan will try also to move to France and try to do what the French can do to help us.
Alia Ibrahim, during the press conference, a couple of times, Michel Aoun talked about how happy and proud he was to be in Lebanon. There was applause by some of the journalists when he stated that. What's your reaction to that?
Well, as a journalist, actually, I find that very offending. The whole setup was a little bit offending because the president of the Journalists Union introduced Mr. Ghosn as Lebanon's favorite son, who is definitely an innocent man. This is not to say that I think that Mr. Ghosn does not deserve a fair trial or deserve justice. This is just to put into context that since the arrival of Mr. Ghosn to Lebanon, there's been big question marks about why he chose Lebanon as opposed to Brazil or to France, which he holds the passport, he's national of both countries. And the most obvious answer is that he chose Lebanon because the legal system in Lebanon is the friendlier towards the kind of accusations that he's facing. Now, this would have been also not very problematic if the timing was a little bit different. Lebanon, for the last 82 days, the Lebanese people have started a revolution, stressing on the importance of reform, stressing primarily on the importance of reforming the judiciary. And when a case of this size and of this magnitude becomes the most important case that the Lebanese public has to deal with, at the same time where the judiciary is prosecuting normal Lebanese citizens, activists, politicians, activists, professors, just for the sake of asking for reform, basically. The whole thing messes up the situation in Lebanon in ways that it's offending. The same way that in a press conference, journalists should not be, in principle, they should be asking questions, not applauding.
All right, and when we come back, I'll be asking.
Just the same way, the whole thing.
When we come back, Ali, I'll be asking you if Carlos Ghosn convinced you with his arguments. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're asking, was Carlos Ghosn right to flee justice in Japan to Lebanon? He staged his big press conference earlier in Beirut. We're talking about it with investigative reporter Jake Adelstein, who is with us at this late hour in Tokyo. Welcome back. Welcome back as well to attorney William Juliet, Jean-Yves Collin, who is with the Asia Center here in Paris, and from Beirut, Alia Ibrahim, co-founder of Diraj Media. Alia, did Carlos Ghosn convince you in that press conference?
Well, as a businessman, yes, he convinced me that he is the successful businessman that he has the reputation to be in this country. It did not convince me because at some point it looked like Mr. Ghosn had the trial that he wanted. He was the lawyer and the judge and the prosecutor during this press conference that he handled really impressively. And that's not how things should be. Even like if we look at it as a press conference, this is a press conference that was on invitation. A lot of journalists were not allowed in. So did Mr. Ghosn, did he succeed in saying his side of the story? Absolutely, yes. Am I convinced that he deserves a fair trial? Yes. But how is the Lebanese judiciary going to deal with this? Why, when he was asked about why he chose Lebanon over the other Brazil or France, he said it was for logistical reasons. And I really don't that did not convince me. I think he chose Lebanon because he knows very well that Lebanon is a place that is much more friendly towards this kind of accusations. We're talking about a country that right now is on the verge of economic collapse. We have $40 billion in money that was allocated for the electricity that still is not functioning. So if you put it into perspective, you'd see that this he's very aware that this is a friendly space that he's coming in. On top of all, he is considered a hero. Today, what he has done for the public at large, he is considered to many a hero. He's very right, as Le Monde survey also said. A lot of people agree that he did very well by escaping and by arriving to Lebanon. It does not come. I mean, I'm very critical of this because we're actually at this very specific time asking to reform the judiciary in Lebanon, to ask to go through processes properly. And a case of this size is on the one hand going to take a lot of the energy of the Lebanese judiciary if they decide to follow up on it. We know very well that Mr. Ghosn will see the prosecutor tomorrow. Maybe no charges even will be raised. But on the other hand, we have the judiciary here that, again, I cannot take this away from what's going on in Lebanon. I cannot take it out from the context of what's going on in Lebanon. We have the judiciary over, I'll give you specific examples. Over just the last 10 days, a university professor, a film director, an activist, and a journalist have been summoned to the Cybercrime Bureau, which is a controversial department created simply to put legal pressure on people on accounts of freedom of speech. So in this context, you see that the judiciary here is going after the rebels, the reformers, the liberals, when at the same time it's giving a lot of privileges for people who are very responsible for a lot of public funds, or in this case, a lot of
a two-speed justice system. You're saying. Let me turn to William Julier. You heard Jake Edelstein's position that
Yes.
Carlos Ghosn did the right thing by
Yes.
escaping. In Plato's Phaedo,
Yes.
Socrates, they give him a chance to escape his fate, and he says, "No, I don't agree with the laws, but I'm a citizen of Athens, so I'll drink the poison hemlock and die."
Yeah, we're not in Athens anymore, for sure.
So did he do the right thing by?
I think the question is not a moral one, of course, on what I can say. This is a tennis game. We have got more than two players. We've got at least three, and I think that we might get a fourth one with Turkey coming in. Maybe we'll have a minute to talk about Turkey. But this is a tennis game, and you have to win points. Carlos Ghosn has, my understanding anyway, is he won a very serious point in escaping.
So he did the right thing.
He did the right thing, I think, when it comes to himself. He won a point. Now he's ahead of things. He was not leading. Now he is. He led this conference, and what I just heard.
And by the way, he wasn't the only one. He wasn't the only one arrested. There was
Greg Kelly is behind now. He's still there. He's not leading. He's not ahead.
This
of
is
things.
an American. The only two arrests are him and Kelly's still in Japan.
Yes, he's not leading. Carlos Ghosn won a point. He's now.
What happens to Greg Kelly?
I think things are going to be even more complicated for him.
He's
now.
waiting for his.
He's waiting for his trial.
He will be in court maybe in a year or in 6 months. He's in Japan now. He's in custody in a way.
So number one is he won a point. Number two is how can he win more, and how can the other players win points? Japan is going to try to win points. They have some legal tools to try and do that. They can't have him extradited, but they can put pressure on Lebanon using international tools. They could use United Nations conventions on organized crime. They have tools they can use to put pressure on him, to try and maybe have some of his assets seized in Lebanon, and to ask the Lebanese government to cooperate with ongoing investigations. They might do that, and I think they will.
Jean-Yves Collin, let me ask you, because people watching this, if you work on the assembly line at Renault and you see that the boss has the means to get a big private to get a private jet to get him out of the country. Again, it's this question of was it the right thing escaping?
Well, again, I share the view that for himself it was the right thing to do. He had to consider the situation and what was the alternative, to stay in Japan and wait for 4 years or 5 years before having a final cut on his trial for the first court, the Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court of Japan, and next to have maybe 10 to 15 years of jail. And
is that what awaits Greg Kelly?
And well, it
could
maybe less because he's in a way the second man. But at least for Carlos Ghosn, he had in view of going out of jail between 80 and 85. So
right.
He preferred to run away.
Now, Japan's justice minister concedes the case has called into question her country's legal system with its 99% conviction rate. But that's not the issue, she says.
There's been much debate surrounding Japan's judicial system. But for us, that debate and leaving Japan illegally are separate issues.
Jake Adelstein, how much debate could there be justice reform in Japan?
There could be a ton of justice reform in Japan. She's so full of crap. There's an entire group of Japanese people who are so angry about the improper use of justice in this country. There's a whole group of people, mostly friends of the prime minister, who don't get arrested, even if it's on rape charges. Those just go away, and the prosecutors don't prosecute them.
What did you think on that point? At one point, they asked. At one point, they asked Carlos Ghosn the implications. Did they go all the way to the top? He replied, "I don't think Abe-san, that is to say, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, was involved."
Yes, but he also didn't stop there and say that there was nobody involved in the Japanese government. So basically, Ghosn is playing it very smart, because by naming Kawaguchi and naming Toyota and these people at Nissan who were involved in this, what was simply a conspiracy between the prosecutors of Nissan and Japanese government leaders to put him in jail and stop Renault from taking over Nissan. He's basically hinted, like, I could say more, but I'm stopping here. And that's probably where the Japanese government wants him to stop. So he has some leverage there. But by naming one of these people, he named someone very close to Yoshihide Suga, who is the cabinet spokesman. And that little jab there probably sent shivers of fear up the Japanese elite.
Yeah, what reactions from ordinary citizens?
The names of the cabinet, right? Yeah. Ordinary citizens in Japan don't get the treatment that the elite get. And Carlos Ghosn isn't politically connected, and that was probably a mistake he made.
And we also heard him say at one point that his biggest regret was not taking a job at GM back in 2009. At several points in his press conference, Ghosn talking up how he saved Nissan back in 1999, stuck by it through the financial crisis, how its values continued to tumble since his ouster, dropping 36% since that fateful day in November when he was arrested at Tokyo Airport. I want to ask you, Jean-Yves Collin, when he was basically saying, when I was there, it was great, and now it's going to the dogs. How does that go down?
Well, but it's obvious that there were many rumors about the situation of Nissan since 1, 2 years, 3 years ago, that things are not going so well at Nissan. But Mr. Ghosn was supposed to revitalize Mitsubishi, and Nissan was in the hand of Saikawa. And Mr. Ghosn said very clearly that he made a mistake, and I think he used another word in French. I think he made a connerie by designating Saikawa as the chief executive officer of Nissan. And at the beginning of his speech, Mr. Ghosn said very clearly that there was a mistrust between him and Saikawa. It's one issue at stake at the origin of the plot, in a way.
Was it that, or because some people are saying that what spooked the Japanese was back in 2015 when the French state upped its stake
but
in the alliance, and therefore saying, hey, there's too much of an imbalance?
I read the story made by Carlos Ghosn, and first there is a mistrust between him and Saikawa and a decline in the financial situation of Nissan. Secondly, there is the issue of more integration of Nissan and Renault, which was the real...
moving towards a merger.
The real... Not a merger, because obviously I think Carlos Ghosn knew that the merger was very, very difficult to do. But even a strengthening of the alliance by the French, if I may say like that, was not taken as a good perspective by some people at Nissan. And I think that's why they started to plot against Carlos Ghosn in spring of 2018.
In Japan, Carlos Ghosn, by the way, who also in this press conference turned his ire on the French, accusing the current management of Renault of betraying him, and in particular, the accountant turned whistleblower who Ghosn says ran a, quote, bogus audit that led to an investigating magistrate now launching a criminal inquiry. More on that from Yinka Oyetara.
Carlos Ghosn, former Renault-Nissan boss, now an international fugitive, and the man entangled in 3 different legal investigations in France. The first investigation Ghosn is at the heart of is the 2 lavish parties organised by him at Versailles. One to celebrate the 15-year anniversary of the Renault-Nissan alliance, the other his wedding, which coincided with his wife's birthday. French prosecutors argue Ghosn misused company money to host the party at Versailles. Ghosn defended both of these parties. He argues he thought Versailles was allowing him to throw his wife's birthday there as a gift.
A rental of the room offered by Versailles. It's written on the document by the people who organize it. And they put €0. I was surprised to see that this cost 50,000 euro because, I don't know what happened behind the scene, somebody went and said, no, you know what, we cannot pay 50,000, we cannot give as a present 50,000 euro.
Ghosn's contracts with former Justice Minister Rachida Dati and another with criminologist Alain Boer are also under investigation. Ghosn gave them approximately €2 million from a Dutch bank account affiliated with the Renault-Nissan group. The work they did for him has also been questioned. French prosecutors also want to question Ghosn over donations he has made and his travel expenses. These expenses paid again from the affiliate Dutch Renault-Nissan account. In theory, Carlos Ghosn's presence in Lebanon does not exempt him from being the target of a French investigation. Under the terms of a mutual assistance agreement between France and Lebanon, France could ask the Lebanese justice system to question Ghosn or extradite him back to France.
Yeah, he had some choice words for the French at times during that press conference. How did he do you think, as a defense attorney for his own cause there?
Listen, I think he did very well when he spoke about his business achievements. I'm not sure he did as well when he spoke about judicial issues.
Or the fact that his salary is now paid in the Netherlands, not in France.
Maybe that was on purpose because they don't want to disclose what is coming next. Maybe it was not. What is for sure is that I think there are going to be moves coming from the French. They will have to step in because they have got these 2 or 3 investigations ongoing at the PNF, the Parquet National Financier. And for at least one of these cases, it's a high-profile case. Rachida Dati's name is in this case, and I guess that the French are going to ask the Lebanese to do something about this. Are they going to cross the border to go and interview Carlos Ghosn in Lebanon? I think this is what they will do, because it would be maybe an embarrassment for French authorities to have Mr. Ghosn come over here without arresting him and having him go back to Lebanon. This would maybe be an embarrassment for the French regarding the Japanese. So I guess that they are going to push things the direction of Lebanon and try and carry on with these investigations going there.
Says he's ready to answer.
This is what I would do if I were the French.
Right. Says he's ready to answer questions. Jake Adelstein, let me ask you, when you sat down with Carlos Ghosn in August, because you got to remember, in this country, there was already a scandal a few years back when he insisted on a huge pay packet as CEO. Did you have the sense of a entitled man?
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I actually expected him to be kind of a arrogant prick, but he was much humbler and much nicer than I thought. And he made some funny jokes about maybe Japan should trade the head of the Olympic Committee who was being investigated for taking bribes in France for Carlos Ghosn. They could make some kind of trade that way, which I thought was kind of funny. But he talked a lot about how he was worried about people at Nissan and how they might lose their jobs because the company was doing badly. So I didn't get that sense of an entitled guy. I got a sense of somebody who was really dismayed and felt really betrayed by the people that he trusted.
Alia Ibrahim, your thoughts, because Carlos Ghosn was for years hailed as a savior at Nissan, and was this model for the business world. Your thoughts on what Carlos Ghosn's image is going forward?
Well, actually, this parallelism is being mentioned a lot in Lebanon. The role that Mr. Ghosn has played in Nissan, specifically again at this time when Lebanon is facing this huge debt problem and this huge economic, on the verge of economic crash. A lot has been said by many people that he could help Lebanon figure out a way out of the mess. And for many, he's
What are you suggesting? He could go into politics?
He's even a candidate. Actually, yes. I mean, there's nothing official about it. Obviously, today he never mentioned it. A few times he hinted about being so happy to be back to Lebanon, and again, it's into context. But yes, at the level of Lebanese circle, at the level of Lebanese circles, it's been mentioned over and over that this is a person that the Lebanese community could learn from because of the role he played at Nissan. Now, obviously, this happens at a time where it's still very unclear what kind of process he will be facing, judiciary processes he will be facing in Lebanon. But given the Lebanese scene, it's as absurd as it may sound. He could possibly be playing a political role in the near future, while at the same time having this case still being opened against him. If he's going to be tried in Lebanon, we don't even know that for now. But when he was asked very specifically today if he changed his Japanese prison to a Lebanese prison, and then he said that he will do his best to clear his name, and not only do his best, he said he is going to clear his name, and it was very obvious that this is a chapter that he's putting behind, and it opens, to, at least at the level of the Lebanese scene, it opens the appetite to a role that he could play here. But absolutely, the fact, and again, it's very much related to his to many. He is a hero in a lot of ways, and actually I think after today's press conference, even people who are very critical of him have been impressed by his ability strategy. Like, he came across as the successful businessman that he is. Right. Let alone what remains is the legal part of it.
All right, corporate success for some, the face of corporate greed for others. It's, of course, too early to say. Carlos Ghosn is promising that in the next week he'll provide more evidence. We'll see about that as well. Much more to say on this topic. I want to thank you so much, Alia Ibrahim, for joining us from Beirut. Jake Adelstein for being with us from Tokyo, Japan, as well as William Julien and Jean-Yves Collin. Yeah. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to James Creedon.
Hi, Francois. So a look at how this has been covered online, first of all. Most rolling news channels carried this 2-hour press conference today. It was a big media event, our own channel not being any exception. Why is Japan paying me with evil for the good I've done to the country? So it sort of played out a little bit like a soap opera online. For Marianne, they called it somewhere between a defence plea and a psychoanalysis session. With Mr. Ghosn being obviously the front and centre. The Carlos show, as some were calling it on social media. And Carlos is gone, the show must go on. This was a Japanese commentary. I suppose he's gone from there at least. He's not gone entirely, but he is gone from Japan. Only one channel broadcasting Carlos Ghosn live on Japanese TV, according to this Japanese Twitter user. Just one, not even the national broadcaster NHK is broadcasting Ghosn. But, Francois, according to L'Orient Le Jour, they did carry live the response of the Japanese prosecutor, or rather the Minister of Justice, who spoke out pretty vociferously against the criticisms of Carlos Ghosn. No surprise there. Some even pointing out that there was an entr'acte, an intermission. He appointed a sort of a 20-minute timeout in the middle, so it had all the hallmarks of popcorn eating sort of spectacle.
All right, popcorn eating spectacle, and as we heard Ali Ibrahim say, a lot of people in Lebanon rooting for Ghosn.
That's right. So trilingual, even quadrilingual press conference. He answered in French, English, Arabic and Portuguese, displaying his various cultural influences. One Twitter user saying that different media were focusing on different angles. The Anglo media were more focused on him slashing Japan. The Lebanese daily L'Orient Le Jour was headlining with every possible quote on his love of Lebanon. We'll get to some quotes on that in a second. The French were more focused on his retelling of the Versailles party, where he celebrated 15 years of the marriage between Renault and Nissan. Or was it his 60th birthday? Was it a private event or a corporate event? That's one of the more intriguing aspects of the personality of Carlos Ghosn. Some saying the megalomania of Carlos Ghosn, or the critics would say it in any case. But certainly the Lebanese commentary online was very elogious of Carlos Ghosn. Regardless of your position towards him, the press conference given by Carlos Ghosn today should be taught in law schools.
Should be taught in law schools.
In terms of his management of the various aspects of the intrigue. I did not escape justice, I escaped injustice, very much picking up on quotes that would cast him in a positive light. This man will always be an example to look up to in the business world. I truly believe he's a victim of Japanese conspiracies. Some even saying that he's a Lebanese legend. So that was the kind of the tone and tenor of the response from spectators in Lebanon. Somewhat less positive, for example, this comment here in France. The press conference of Carlos Ghosn demonstrates that justice must be done in the courts, not through the media. He's a skillful speaker who seems easily convincing and creates empathy, but the complexity of such a file cannot be dealt with in 30 minutes or a few tweets. That same commentator going on to say, who are we, the public or even journalists, to judge the vague documents presented by Carlos Ghosn? In other words, this is a media circus, which is pretty much what the Justice Minister in Japan said, that this was a one-sided affair, which is, I suppose, what you're always going to get when it's maybe trial by media is the wrong word, but defence by media.
And the cartoonists have been at it.
They certainly have. I am innocent, says Carlos Ghosn. That's, I think, a play on the Japanese flag there, with perhaps the more crucial elements being hidden. And moving on, of course, many riffs and jokes about the manner in which he is thought to have escaped.
We'll talk about it.
That's right. This was the Wall Street Journal, one of their journalists who claims to have a photo of this particular case in which he may or may not have escaped. That has produced a lot of jokes online, people imagining sort of oversized suitcases and whatnot. And there again, a suitcase or an oversized suitcase talking about how les caisses noires, c'est pas mon truc.
Black boxes.
Kind of brown envelopes, or and a reference to perhaps shady dealings.
All right, many thanks for that, James Creedon. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.